Princess of the Trailer Park, Shelly's Journey. Shelly knew she was royalty. At just 4 pounds of tan fur and enormous bat-like ears, the 4-year-old Chihuahua carried herself with the dignity befitting her status. Her domain might have been a modest double wide in the Whispering Pines trailer park on the outskirts of Denton, but to Shelly, it was a palace, and she, its princess. Her human, whom she thought of simply as Abuela, had made this abundantly clear from the day she'd brought Shelly home, a trembling puppy no bigger than Abuela's weathered palm. "Mi princesita," Abuela would coo, scratching behind Shelly's ears as the tiny dog's eyes closed in bliss. "My little queen?" Abuela was in her 70s, with silver hair always pulled into a neat bun and hands that smelled of spices and rose-scented lotion. She had come from a small town outside of Mexico City decades ago, bringing with her recipes handed down through generations and a fierce independence that even advancing age couldn't diminish. The other residents of Whispering Pines knew better than to cross Senora Martinez, or her fiercely protective canine companion. Shelly went everywhere with Abuela, to the grocery store tucked into her special purse, to doctor's appointments where she'd sit regally on Abuela's lap, even to church, where the priest had long since given up trying to enforce a no-pets policy after Abuela had fixed him with a steely gaze and informed him that Shelly was no pet, padre, but family. Shelly particularly loved their walks through the trailer park, where residents would bow to her sovereignty with gentle pets and the occasional treat slipped to her when Abuela pretended not to notice. Their routine was as predictable as the sunrise. Mornings began with Abuela's creaky movements around the kitchen, the rich smell of coffee mixing with the sizzle of eggs that Shelly knew would result in a morsel or two finding its way to her special ceramic bowl with "Princess" painted in glittery pink letters. Afternoons meant telenovelas. Shelly curled in Abuela's lap as dramatic music swelled and actors gasped at shocking revelations. Evenings were for sitting on the small wooden porch, watching the Texas sunset paint the sky in oranges and pinks as Abuela stroked Shelly's fur and whispered stories of her youth in Mexico. It was during these twilight conversations that Shelly would sometimes notice a tremor in Abuela's hands or hear the slight catch in her breath. But such concerns would quickly fade when dinner was served, with Shelly always receiving a tiny portion of whatever Abuela had prepared for herself. After all, a princess did not eat dog food. The night everything changed began like any other. They'd watched their shows, eaten their dinner, and settled into Abuela's bed, with Shelly in her customary position on the pillow next to her human's head. But sometime in the darkness, Shelly was awakened by strange sounds. Abuela was making noises. Not her usual soft snores, but labored gasps. Shelly licked her face frantically, but the old woman didn't respond. The little dog began to bark with all the force her tiny body could muster, a high-pitched alarm that finally roused Mrs. Henderson next door, who called 911. Shelly watched in terror as strangers in uniforms invaded her kingdom, touching Abuela, speaking in urgent tones, and finally, most horrifying of all, taking Abuela away on a rolling bed. Shelly tried to follow, launching herself from the bed with such determination that one of the uniformed humans had to catch her in midair. "Whoa there, little one," the man said, setting her back on the bed. "You can't come along. Don't worry, we're taking good care of your mama." But as the door closed, leaving Shelly alone in the suddenly vast and silent trailer, worry was all she could do. Hours stretched into days. Shelly's precision internal clock, which had always guided her to the moment when Abuela would fill her water bowl or offer an afternoon treat, now served only to mark the endless passage of time without her human. At first, she'd been strategic, conserving the water left in her bowl, rationing the kibble that Abuela always left in a small dish for emergencies. But by the 3rd day, both were gone. Hunger twisted Shelly's stomach into knots, and thirst made her tongue feel like sandpaper. She whimpered at the door until her voice gave out, then resorted to the unthinkable, using a corner of the kitchen as her bathroom, something Abuela had trained her never to do. The shame of it nearly overwhelmed her, but bodily needs proved stronger than royal decorum. It was on the 5th day that the door finally opened. Shelly, who had been dozing fitfully on Abuela's pillow, which still held her scent, sprang to attention. Her tail wagged so hard it nearly threw her tiny body off balance as she rushed to the door. But it wasn't Abuela who entered. It was a man, tall, with Abuela's eyes but none of her warmth. Shelly had seen him in photographs and during rare, tense visits. Miguel, Abuela's son. "Damn," he muttered, wrinkling his nose at the state of the trailer. "What a mess." Shelly approached cautiously, her royal dignity momentarily forgotten in her desperation for information about Abuela and her urgent need for food and water. She pawed at his pant leg, trying to communicate. Miguel looked down, his face twisting in disgust. "Get away from me, rat," he snapped, kicking out. His foot connected with Shelly's side, sending her small body skidding across the linoleum. Pain exploded through her ribs, but more shocking was the betrayal. No one had ever struck her before. She was a princess. Abuela had always said so. Miguel spent the next few hours making phone calls and stuffing Abuela's belongings into trash bags. Shelly kept her distance, watching from under the sofa, trying to make sense of this invasion. When he filled a glass with tap water and drank deeply, Shelly's thirst overcame her fear. She crept out, hopeful that he might share. Instead, he shooed her away and opened the front door. "Out," he commanded. "Go on. Get out." Shelly stood her ground. This was her home, her territory. She might be small, but she was still its rightful defender. Miguel's patience, tenuous at best, snapped. He lunged for her, and Shelly darted away, but in her weakened state, she wasn't fast enough. His hand closed around her middle, squeezing painfully, and before she could comprehend what was happening, she was airborne. He had thrown her out the door, onto the patch of hard-packed dirt that served as a front yard. The door slammed shut behind her. Shelly stood trembling, the February air cutting through her short coat like knives. North Texas winters weren't as harsh as some, but to a Chihuahua accustomed to heated interiors and warm laps, the 40-degree temperature felt arctic. She scratched at the door, her claws leaving desperate marks on the wood, but it remained closed. As night fell, bringing with it even colder air and a light, miserable drizzle, Shelly huddled beneath the wooden steps leading to the trailer, her entire body shaking. She waited, certain that Abuela would return soon and set things right. But the next morning brought not Abuela, but an enormous truck with a hitch. Shelly watched in disbelief as men connected the truck to her home and, with a great mechanical groan, began to pull it away. Miguel stood nearby, talking with the driver. Shelly made one last desperate attempt, running toward him and barking, trying to remind him that she belonged inside, with Abuela's things, with Abuela when she returned. "That damn dog is still here," Miguel said to the driver. "Thought it would have wandered off by now." "Want me to call animal control?" the driver offered. Miguel shrugged. "Nah, don't bother. It's not my problem anymore. Let it fend for itself." And with that, Shelly watched as her entire world, her palace, her territory, all of Abuela's scents and things, was towed away, leaving nothing but a rectangular patch of compressed earth where home had been. The first week of homelessness nearly killed her. Shelly, who had never spent more than a few minutes outside unattended, found herself in a brutal crash course on survival. The trailer park, once her queendom where she'd been treated with deference, became alien territory. Other dogs, sensing her vulnerability, chased her away from potential food sources. Cats, which she'd previously regarded with royal disdain from the safety of Abuela's arms, now posed legitimate threats with their sharp claws and predatory instincts. But worst of all were the birds. Hawks and the occasional eagle, creatures she'd never had to worry about when sheltered by walls and a roof, now circled overhead, their keen eyes tracking her movements. Once, a red-tailed hawk had swooped down, talons extended, and only Shelly's instinctive dive under a parked car had saved her from becoming a raptor's dinner. Water was her first priority. She learned that puddles formed in the dips and depressions throughout the park after the frequent February rains, providing relief for her constant thirst. Food was harder to come by. She dug through trash when she could. The princess reduced to scavenging, her once immaculate fur becoming matted and dirty. She lost weight rapidly, her already small frame becoming dangerously thin. Sleep came in brief, vigilant snatches, never the deep, contented slumber she'd enjoyed on Abuela's bed. Always, she kept one ear perked for danger, one eye half open. The construction site on the edge of the trailer park became her salvation. Where once open fields had stretched, now foundations were being poured for what would become a new subdivision. The workers brought lunches packed by wives and mothers, sandwiches, chips, sometimes leftover dinner in plastic containers. And while they worked, these treasures sat unattended in lunchboxes and brown paper bags. Shelly, her royal bearing giving way to survival instinct, became a thief. Her first successful heist. Half a ham sandwich extracted from a partially unzipped lunchbox gave her more sustenance than she'd had in days. The workers, puzzled by the disappearance of food items, initially blamed each other. But soon enough, one caught a glimpse of a tan blur darting away from the site, a stolen string cheese clutched triumphantly in tiny jaws. "It's that stray Chihuahua," the worker told his buddies. "Little things stealing our lunches." They tried setting traps. Boxes propped up with sticks, loops of rope. But Shelly was too clever and too desperate to be caught. One man, frustrated after losing an entire roast beef sandwich, brought a pellet gun the next day. The pellets wouldn't kill her, he reasoned, but might scare her off for good. When the pellet grazed her hindquarter, the pain was shocking. Shelly yelped and ran, the piece of turkey she'd been stealing falling from her mouth. The man's laughter followed her, adding humiliation to injury. That night, huddled beneath a discarded tarp near the construction site, she licked the small wound and shivered, wondering if this was to be her life now. Hungry, cold, hunted. But Shelly was nothing if not adaptable. She began to observe the workers more carefully, learning their patterns. Some were more vigilant with their food than others. Some went to their trucks at precise times to smoke cigarettes, leaving their workstations unattended. She became strategic, waiting for the right moment to dart in, grab what she could, and disappear before anyone noticed. It wasn't a good life, but it was life. And somewhere in the back of her canine mind, she still held out hope that somehow, someday, Abuela would find her. The day that changed everything again dawned cold and clear, a rare respite from the rain. Shelly had spent the night under a pile of construction debris, which provided some insulation against the chill. She was thinner than she'd ever been, her once glossy coat now dull and patchy, but she was alive. That counted for something. The construction site was quieter than usual. It was Saturday, she'd learned, which meant fewer workers. But as she approached, using the tall grasses for cover, she spotted something unusual. A woman sitting at a folding table outside one of the partially completed houses. The woman was unlike the construction workers. She wore a blue sweater instead of a safety vest. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. And most importantly, she had a sandwich. The scent wafted towards Shelly on the breeze. Peanut butter and something sweet. Jelly? Maybe. Shelly's stomach gave an audible growl, reminding her that her last meal had been some discarded French fries she'd found the previous evening. Hunger overcoming caution, Shelly crept closer, staying low in the grass. The woman seemed absorbed in looking at papers spread on the table. Blueprints, maybe, or contracts. The sandwich sat tantalizingly at the edge of the table. Just as Shelly prepared to make her dash, the woman looked up and directly at her. Shelly froze, expecting the usual reaction. A shout, a thrown object, a threat. Instead, the woman's face softened. "Well, hello there," she said, her voice gentle. "Where did you come from, little one?" Shelly remained motionless, uncertain. The woman tore off a small piece of her sandwich and held it out. "Are you hungry? You look like you could use a good meal." The smell of the peanut butter was irresistible. Shelly took a tentative step forward, then another. The woman didn't move, just kept holding out the morsel. Patient. When Shelly was within reach, she stretched her neck out as far as possible, snatched the piece of sandwich, and darted back a few feet to eat it safely. The taste, sweet, rich, familiar from treats Abuela had sometimes shared, nearly brought tears to her eyes, if dogs could cry. "There's more where that came from," the woman said, tearing off another piece. This offering required less coaxing. Shelly approached more quickly, though still ready to flee at the first sign of danger. But the woman remained still, speaking in that same soft voice that reminded Shelly just a little of how Abuela used to talk to her. After the third piece of sandwich, the woman slowly reached into her bag and pulled out a plastic container. Opening it released a smell that made Shelly's mouth water instantly. Chicken. Cold, leftover chicken, But to a half-starved dog, it might as well have been a feast at Buckingham Palace. "I was saving this for later," the woman said, placing a small piece on the ground near her feet. "But you need it more than I do." It took every ounce of courage Shelly possessed to approach so close to the woman's feet. But the chicken, was worth the risk. She darted in, grabbed it, and retreated again to savor it. The woman continued this pattern, placing morsels slightly closer to herself each time, talking all the while in that soothing voice. "You're just skin and bones, aren't you? Poor baby. How long have you been out here all alone?" Shelly didn't understand all the words, but she understood the tone. This human wasn't like the construction workers or Miguel. This human was kind. When the chicken was gone, the woman stood slowly. Shelly tensed, ready to run. "I'm going inside for just a minute," the woman explained, as if Shelly could comprehend. "Don't go anywhere, okay? I'll be right back." Shelly considered fleeing while the woman was gone. It would be the cautious thing to do, but something, hunger, exhaustion, or perhaps a desperate hope this kindness might continue, kept her rooted to the spot. True to her word, the woman returned moments later with more food and a small bowl that she filled with water from a bottle. Shelly's thirst, a constant companion these past weeks, drove her forward to lap eagerly at the clean, cool water. It was while she was drinking that the woman's hand descended slowly toward her. Shelly tensed but didn't run. The touch, when it came, was gentle, a soft stroke along her back. How long had it been since she'd been petted? Since she'd felt a kind human hand? "You poor thing," the woman murmured. "You've had it rough, haven't you?" Before Shelly knew what was happening, she was being lifted, not roughly like Miguel had done, but gently, supportively, with hands that cradled her small body with care. Her first instinct was to struggle, but the woman immediately began to stroke her head in long, soothing movements. "It's okay," she said. "I've got you now. You're safe." And with those words, Shelly found herself captured, not by force, but by kindness. Not as a prisoner, but as a rescued princess. The woman's name was Christine Thompson. Shelly learned, though in her mind she would always think of her simply as Savior. That first day, Christine took her not home, but to a place that smelled strongly of other animals and chemicals, a veterinarian's office. "This little one needs help." Christine told the man in the white coat, "I found her at our construction site. She's been stealing lunches from the workers for weeks, apparently." The veterinarian was gentle but thorough, examining Shelly from her ears to her tail. Despite her fear, she endured it stoically. She was a princess, after all. Princesses did not bite doctors, no matter how much they might want to. "She's severely undernourished," the vet said. "And she's got some minor injuries. That scratch on her hindquarter looks like a pellet wound, probably from someone trying to scare her off. No microchip, though, which surprises me. A purebred Chihuahua like this was somebody's pet at some point." "Can you tell how long she's been on her own?" Christine asked, her hand never leaving Shelly's back. "Hard to say exactly. Based on her condition, I'd guess at least a month, maybe more. She's a survivor, this one." Survivor. Shelly rather liked that title, perhaps even better than princess. The doctor gave her medicines and fluids that made her feel stronger almost immediately. Christine paid what seemed like many pieces of paper for these services, but she didn't complain or hesitate. And when they left the veterinarian's office, Shelly found herself not back at the construction site, but in a car, and then in a house. A real house, warm and solid and safe. The first thing Shelly noticed about the house was the smell. Another dog lived here, she could tell immediately, and, horrifyingly, a cat. But Christine carried her straight to a softly cushioned bed near a heating vent and set her down gently. "This can be yours," she said, "at least until we find your owners, if you have any looking for you." Shelly sank into the cushion, the warmth from the vent washing over her like a physical caress. She was still alert, still watchful. Survival instincts couldn't be discarded so quickly, but for the first time in weeks, she allowed her muscles to truly relax. Christine brought her a small bowl of what the veterinarian had recommended, soft food mixed with kibble soaked in warm water. Shelly ate slowly, savoring each bite, half expecting it to be taken away at any moment. But Christine just sat nearby, watching with a smile. "You were somebody's baby," she said softly. "I can tell. You ate so politely, even half-starved. We'll find out where you belong, little one." But Shelly already knew where she belonged, with someone who fed her and kept her warm and spoke to her in that gentle voice. If not Abuela, then perhaps this new human could be her person. The meeting with the other animals went better than expected. Joe, the other dog, was a mild-mannered Labrador mix with gray around his muzzle who gave Shelly a cursory sniff and then largely ignored her, apparently finding her too insignificant to bother with. The cat, a plump orange tabby named Marmalade, stayed atop a bookshelf, looking down with a disapproving stare, but didn't attack. For Shelly, this was acceptable. She could learn to share. In the weeks that followed, Shelly gained weight. Her coat grew back in, and her eyes regained their brightness. Christine put up posters around the neighborhood and posted online, trying to find Shelly's previous owner, but no one came forward. Eventually, Christine stopped saying, "If we find your family," and started calling her my little girl. A new ceramic bowl appeared in the kitchen, this one with Shelly painted in sparkly purple letters. And Shelly? She decided that perhaps royalty wasn't about where you lived or how many people bowed to you. Maybe being a princess meant surviving hardship with grace. Maybe it meant knowing your worth, even when the world tried to forget you. Or maybe it was as simple as finding a new kingdom in a warm lap and a kind voice. Either way, Shelly was home.